What if a freak radio signal allowed you to talk to your deceased father 30 years in the past? You save his life with a single warning, only to discover that in the new timeline you've created, your mother becomes the next victim of a serial killer. The sun itself is in chaos, a seething mass of fire sending strange, shimmering light across space. Down on Earth, this cosmic energy coincides with a near catastrophe as a gas truck driver swerves to avoid disaster, only to have his massive tanker crash across a freeway. With the entire Bronx a spark away from oblivion, firefighter Frank Sullivan arrives on the scene. With the tanker ready to blow, Frank makes a dangerously bold choice. His colleagues plead with him. The vault door is rusted shut. There's not enough time, but Frank ignores them, choosing to descend into a manhole, the only way in. What? Miss the World Series? He quips, a perfect glimpse into the gutsy, risk-taking hero we're about to follow. Is it courage, or is it a reckless gamble? This is just the beginning of a mind-bending story. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a recap like this. Deep in the dark tunnels, Frank and his partner are in a frantic race against time as volatile gasoline rises toward live electrical cables. They find a metal door with trapped workers on the other side and manage to pry it open, releasing a torrent of water just in the nick of time. They pull an injured man to safety, but their luck has run out. A live cable drops, and the tanker erupts in a furious fireball that incinerates the tunnel. Frank makes a heart-stopping escape, narrowly cheating death as flames explode from the manhole right behind him. But the inferno of his job is a world away from his life at home. It's October 10th, 1969, and Frank is a charismatic family man cruising through Queens on his motorcycle. He's lovingly greeted by his 6-year-old son, Johnny, and his buddy Gordo. In the kitchen, he finds his wife, Julia, frustrated with a ruined dinner sauce, but Frank, all charm and affection, grabs her for a dance. Their love is the warm, comforting center of their world. That evening, beneath a sky streaked with the eerie glow of the aurora borealis, Frank tries to teach a nervous Johnny how to ride his bike without training wheels. After Johnny takes a tumble, Julia gently reminds Frank not to be so tough on him. Later, Frank steps outside for a cigarette and shares a quiet, tender moment with his son, who watches from the bedroom window. He gives Johnny a salute, a silent promise between them, unaware that this peaceful night is the start of something utterly impossible. 30 years later to the day, October 10th, 1999, the same house looks worn, the antenna on the roof in disrepair. An adult John Sullivan's life is in a similar state of decay as his girlfriend, Samantha, leaves him for good, telling him he's incapable of change. His childhood friend Gordo drops by, and they stumble upon a relic from the past in a closet, Frank's old ham radio. But this isn't just an old piece of junk, and what happens when it's plugged in will change everything. Gordo, full of nostalgia, tries to get the old radio working, but it seems to be nothing more than a lost cause. After his friends leave, John is left alone, the silence amplifying his loneliness. That night, a television program discusses the very same aurora borealis from 1969, now brighter than it's been in 30 years. A physicist explains string theory, introducing the mind-bending idea that there might be more than one dimension of time, planting a seed for the supernatural events about to unfold. Suddenly, the ham radio crackles to life. John finds himself in a conversation with a man who, impossibly, is also in Queens. They start talking about baseball, specifically the 1969 Amazon Mets World Series. But the conversation takes a bizarre turn when the man on the other end, Frank, talks about Game 1 as if it just happened, while John recalls it as a piece of history. Their crossed wires hint at a connection far stranger than either of them could imagine. John's life as a police detective is a lonely one. In 1999, he works a case involving a skeleton found at a construction site. While interviewing a neighbor, Mrs. Shepard, he learns her son, Jack, was also a cop. Later, John has dinner with his mother, Julia, on the eve of a difficult anniversary. 30 years since his father, Frank, died in the Buxton warehouse fire. He was just a big kid, Julia recalls fondly, painting a picture of a man who loved firefighting, baseball, and his family with all his heart. That night, John gets back on the radio and speaks to the mysterious baseball fan again. To test him, John asks about the outcome of Game 2, and the man correctly predicts Al Weiss's game-winning single. Just then, John hears a little boy's voice, and Frank mentions his nickname for his son, Little Chief. In that chilling moment, the impossible truth dawns on him. Could he truly be speaking to his own father across a gap of 30 years? The proof becomes undeniable when Frank, in 1969, accidentally drops a lit cigarette, and a fresh burn mark appears on the desk right in front of John in 1999. Overcome with desperation, John uses this miraculous connection to change history. He warns his father about the Buxton warehouse fire, the fire that will kill him the very next day. He gives Frank a crucial piece of advice he heard from his father's old partner. If you'd just gone the other way, you would have made it. The next day, Frank's world is turned upside down as the World Series game plays out exactly as John predicted. Then, the call comes in. A fire at the Buxton warehouse. Frank knows this is it. He gears up and heads into the blaze his son warned him about. His face a mask of intense concentration. The situation becomes tragically real when a young woman runs up, screaming that her sister is trapped on the top floor. Now, he has no choice but to face his destiny. As Frank pushes deeper into the inferno, a staircase collapses in a wall of fire, cutting him off from his partner below. At that very moment in 1999, John sits in a bar, quietly mourning the father who died in this fire 30 years ago. The film masterfully cuts between Frank fighting for his life and John living with the consequences. Frank finally finds the unconscious girl, but the ladder that was his only way out is jammed. He is trapped, with no way out. Just as all hope seems lost, Frank recalls his son's words echoing from the future, "Gone the other way." He makes a split-second decision and runs into the flames. His choice leads him to a grain chute, a desperate escape route. As Frank and the girl slide to safety, new memories flood John's mind. He suddenly remembers his father being there for his police academy graduation and teaching him how to swing a bat, a whole lifetime of moments that never happened before. History is rewriting itself. Frank lands in the river, miraculously alive. In the bar, John turns to a stunned Satch and declares, "My father didn't die in a fire." In this new timeline, Frank survived but died 10 years ago from lung cancer. John rushes home, his mind reeling. He gets his father back on the radio, eager to see if the connection is still there. But what happens next will reveal a devastating twist that no one saw coming. He gets his father back on the radio, and the first thing a grateful Frank does is take young Johnny outside to finally teach him how to ride his bike. A moment of pure, unadulterated joy. In 1999, John finds his home filled with photos of a life he now remembers sharing with his dad. To prove he's still there, Frank uses a soldering iron in 1969 to burn a message into the desk. "I'm still here, Chief." The words smoke and appear right before John's eyes. The two men reconnect, their voices thick with emotion. "You're the voice of an angel," Frank says. "Reach right out of heaven and pull my butt out of the fire." John struggles to explain the surreal experience of having two sets of memories, one where his father died and one where he lived. He's the only one who remembers the old timeline, a lonely burden to carry, but a small price to pay for this second chance. Frank and John catch up on 30 years of life in one incredible conversation. Frank learns his son became a cop, and that his baseball dreams never came true. John learns about his future, a fire-engine red Mustang he will one day love, and tries to save his dad a second time by warning him about the cigarettes that will eventually cause his death. Their talk ends with a heartfelt exchange of, "I love you," a moment John has waited 30 years for, but their actions have had unforeseen and horrifying consequences. In 1969, an overjoyed Frank visits Julia at the hospital, a visit that never would have happened if he'd died. That night, John is tormented by a new nightmare, one filled with visions of his mother's funeral. He wakes up in a cold sweat, and this is the exact moment where saving a life creates an even greater tragedy. John's new reality is a nightmare. He rushes to see Samantha, but she no longer knows him as anything more than a neighbor. At the precinct, He learns from Satch that the skeleton they found belongs to a victim of the Nightingale, a serial killer from the late 60s. But in this new timeline, the killer didn't just murder 3 women, he murdered 10. John looks through the case files and finds the unthinkable. A file for his own mother, Julia Sullivan, now one of the Nightingale's victims. John frantically gets back on the radio to tell his father the devastating news. His mother was murdered on October 22, 1969, just 1 week from now in Frank's time. They realize that by saving Frank, they altered the timeline in a way that put Julia in the killer's path. She was at the hospital the night Frank visited, a place she never would have been otherwise. They inadvertently gave the Nightingale a new target, and now they must work together across time to stop him. John, the cop from the future, becomes his father's eyes and ears, using old case files to guide Frank, the man of action in the past. Their first mission is to save the next victim, a nurse named Carrie Reynolds. Frank goes to the bar where she was last seen and keeps a close watch on her. By simply being there and talking to her, he changes her fate. The killer backs off. It's a small victory, but it proves their impossible plan can actually work. They get a break in the case when the first victim is identified as Mary Finelli. In 1969, Frank has a heartwarming idea. He lets Julia and young Johnny talk on the radio to the mysterious cop from the future. Julia has a charming, unknowing conversation with her own grown son, telling him how proud his mother must be of him. John, his voice thick with emotion, can only reply, "I hope she knows how much I love her." After Julia says goodnight, young Gordo gets on the radio, calling himself the Space Cowboy. Seizing a funny opportunity, John pretends to be Santa Claus and gives his childhood friend a magic word to remember, Yahoo. This one word will one day make Gordo a very rich man. With that, they get back to business. The next victim is Sissy Clark, and John gives Frank all the details he needs to try and save her. But this time, things won't be so easy. In 1999, John follows a lead from Mary Finelli's old yearbook, which points to a man named Daryl Simpson, who has a prior conviction for sexual assault. John brings him in for questioning, convinced he's the guy. Meanwhile, in 1969, Frank watches Sissy Clark at the Kaleidoscope Club, but he doesn't realize he's also being watched. Frank follows Sissy into the restroom area, but he's ambushed by a man from the bar, Jack Shepard. Jack beats Frank unconscious, steals his driver's license, and sees the photo of Julia in his wallet. He's about to strangle Frank when 2 hippies walk in, unknowingly saving Frank's life. Shepard dumps Frank in a stall and leaves. He now knows where Frank lives and has a new target, Julia. Frank comes to and races to Sissy Clark's apartment, but he's too late. He finds her murdered. He's devastated, feeling responsible for her death. On the radio, John reassures him, but Frank reveals the killer took his license. John realizes this is their chance. The killer's fingerprints must be on Frank's wallet. They hatch a plan. Frank will hide the wallet somewhere in the house where John can find it 30 years later. Frank wraps the wallet and hides it under a loose floorboard in the window seat. In 1999, John goes to the exact same spot and pulls out the dust-covered wallet, perfectly preserved. He rushes it to forensics, where they lift a perfect thumbprint that matches a cop in the database, Jack Shepard. The killer is a cop. John goes to see Jack Shepard's father again, this time knowing the dark truth. He learns that Jack's own mother was murdered, a crime that was never solved, and that Jack was kicked off the force. Later, John confronts an older Jack Shepard in a bar. He lays out the case, revealing he knows Jack killed Mary Finelli and then murdered his own mother to change his MO. "You went down 30 years ago, pal," John tells the killer coolly. "You just don't know it yet." John tells Frank that the killer is a cop, but their plan is interrupted when Satch de Leon shows up at Frank's house in 1969. He's investigating Sissy Clark's murder and found Frank's driver's license under her body. Frank is now the prime suspect. As Satch tries to arrest him, the ham radio is knocked to the floor and breaks, severing the connection between father and son. Frank is completely on his own. At the precinct, Frank is in a world of trouble. An eyewitness saw him at the victim's apartment, and his prints are everywhere. Desperate to make Satch believe his impossible story, he makes a wild prediction about the World Series game. He details, with incredible accuracy, that Cleon Jones will get hit by a pitch, leaving a shoe polish mark on the ball, leading to a Mets rally and a 5-3 victory. He tells Satch to just go watch the game. While Jules waits anxiously, Satch watches the game on a small TV at the station. Meanwhile, Jack Shepard, the real killer, shows up at the precinct, using his old badge to get access to Frank. He enters the interrogation room and pulls a gun, but Frank fights back. He screams for Satch, but another detective interrupts, thinking Frank is Jack's caller, and Jack coolly plays along. Satch tries to get information from Jules, explaining Frank's wild story about talking to their son in the future. As they talk, the baseball game unfolds on TV exactly as Frank predicted, right down to the shoe polish on the ball. Satch is stunned into belief. Back in the interrogation room, Frank creates a diversion, electrocuting Jack just long enough to cause a station-wide blackout. During the chaos of the blackout and the subsequent sprinkler system activation, Frank escapes the precinct. He uses the address from Jack's license to break into his apartment, where he finds a hidden box of trophies, jewelry taken from all the Nightingale victims. But Jack returns, and a desperate chase ensues across rooftops and over fences, with Jack firing at him the whole time. The chase leads to a derelict pier, where the two men fight viciously in the dark water below. Frank gains the upper hand, beating Jack with a metal bar and leaving him to sink into the river. Just as Frank pulls himself from the water, Satch arrives, having found the trophy box and realizing Frank was telling the truth. Frank is finally exonerated and goes home to a relieved Julia. In 1969, Frank sits at his desk. He looks at his pack of cigarettes, crushes it, and throws it away, finally heeding his son's warning. He then begins to repair the broken ham radio. As he works in the past, the components on John's radio in 1999 magically reassemble themselves. The radio lights up just as John gets a call from his dad. "We did it, son," Frank says. "We stopped him." But John feels a sense of dread. If they stopped him, why does he have no memory of his mother being alive? This is where things get. John's dread is realized when an aged Jack Shepard, who survived the fight in the river, appears in his house in 1999 and attacks him. Simultaneously, in 1969, a younger Jack attacks Frank and his family. A brutal fight erupts across both timelines. Jules saves Johnny by leaping on Jack's back, giving Frank an opening. He grabs a shotgun and blasts Jack's hand off. In 1999, the older Jack watches in horror as his own hand shrivels and disappears from John's neck. As the house in 1999 transforms around him, the older Jack looks up to see an old man step out of the shadows, shotgun in hand. It's Frank Sullivan, now an old man himself, who saved the shotgun for 30 years for this very moment. He fires, killing Jack for good. John looks up from the floor to see his father, gray-haired and wrinkled, helping him to his feet. "I'm still here, Chief," Frank says, and the two men embrace, finally, truly reunited.